being the first class of the new year, I would like to do a very short overview of the path of the Buddha, or the teaching of the Buddha, and how it's applicable to us, and how may a student of Dhamma approach the path, how may we put it in practice. In summary, many teachers have described the method of Buddha as the path of purification. It's somewhat ambiguous whenever somebody says purification. Purification of what, we wonder? What it implies here is the purification of mind, purification of perception, purification of our emotion. When we study the life of the Buddha, we realize that for Buddha, it was much of an emotional journey than it was a physical one. We know he lived a very princely life. He did not suffer any material loss, not even a loss of relative or a very loved one, or very near or dear one. And yet when he gave up his life as a prince and wandered throughout the vast continent of India, many places he was invited to stay and become a teacher, lead many great monasteries, and he kept on wandering further because he wanted to understand why the emotions in his mind keep changing. Why, though somewhere in the depth of his mind he wants to find this spot, that little edge where he can just rest in peace, where he can have peace and quiet mind. And yet somehow one or the other thing keeps happening. And the mind keeps going further, keeps winding up. And sometimes if something is not happening, then it's worse. That when mind finds that something, be it painful or sad, any of such a nature is not happening, it feels worse about being dull, about not having any excitement, even excitement to worry about, excitement to plan ahead for. And you realize, what was all this? Why was it all happening? And he tried to understand it deeply. And the advice he gave as you matured, being as someone who has learned through his experience, later on became the Arya Marga, or the path of the noble ones. Many teachers later on started calling it the path of purification. We don't know exactly how the purification happens. But there have been many teachers, many practitioners, even today, when we walk the teaching of the Buddha, when we put it in practice, we experience purification. We experience the results. We experience the peace that is born out of the process of purification. Not always the peace. Sometimes the pain, the suffering, the roughness that comes out through the process of purification too. But we experience that it leading us towards peace. We experience that I'm definitely gravitating more towards peace and calmness. So we don't know how exactly the purification takes place, but we know the purification happens and it can be experienced. In summary, teachers have divided his path into threefold. First one traditionally is called Sila, second one is called Samadhi, the third step is called the Panya. Or the first stage, initial stage for any student, is to understand the practice of good behavior, to train oneself into good action, and the cognition that works behind it. So basically to try and train ourselves into constructive, meaningful behavior all the time. And that becomes a practice on its own. Just a while ago, Venerable Bodhima, she was bringing up the challenge, mindfulness challenge, trying to use the non-dominant hand. And it's interesting for me to see a monk, a traditional monastic, to see a different kind of meditation is interesting. But I consider myself more of a system engineer. I try and understand what is really happening. And I know the person who has come up with this technique, this idea, he has definitely practiced it. So it worked for him. He brought something nice. So I tried to understand what was really happening, why it worked. It felt like it's doing something good. This is dealing with the very first stage of the Buddha's teaching, what we generally call sila, or the behavioral action, training ourselves into mindful action. That before we act, we compose ourselves. We develop and train an ability to set forth an objective. What am I doing? What should I be doing? Is it what I really want to do? Is it what is going to satisfy me and make me happy? So having that awareness before we act. Very often what happens is that, overtaken by emotion, we act first, and the awareness of the result or the action comes later. Might be just few seconds difference, but it makes the whole thing, turns it on its head. But if we could put the awareness before the action, we would realize that half the time that action wasn't even necessary. Sometimes more than half the time. People have done it so many places. I remember once I was reading a journal published by some group of scientists, and they were trying to apply mindfulness into weight control or overeating. And all they were training them into is to train to watch your action, what you are doing, to understand the ideas of what Buddha taught as karma, the consequence of your action. Always be mindful of that. So put awareness first before the action. And whenever they felt the urge to eat something, just to try and contemplate, to bring in the awareness. Oh, I want to eat. Why? Will I be happy about it? No, I will feel guilty about having overeaten. And they realized just that awareness. Some people really had the patience, they developed the patience to put that awareness before the action. They found it helped a lot. So we can employ anything into mindfulness, but as long as we are bringing in the awareness in our action. But it becomes very complicated. When everything can become a meditation, then there is a danger that nothing can become meditation as well. So to narrow it down, Buddha had what we would call a very narrow approach, but very precise approach. It was very systematic. He said, begin with your primal instincts. Begin with your universal nature that is common to everyone. And he says, first one, the most powerful of those primal nature that works with the depth of your mind is the idea of balance. Work with that. So he says the first behavioral training one accepts, and he was very systematic fellow. He came up with the idea of precepts. So anybody who started the path, he says, you receive precepts of training. And sometimes it helps a lot. Sometimes we just follow it as a clinical system in a way. He says, accept the precept of non-balance, that you will watch your nature of balance. And many people have forgotten, they have translated the idea of what Buddha says, panatipata, veramani, the first precept of Buddha, into idea of non-killing, non-harming. But it was much deeper than that. When a Buddha talks, idea of non-violence is not new, not even the contribution of the Buddha. It was always in India since the time immemorial, since the history, since the era of the legends that we have known. And when an enlightened person wants to talk, a quality of an enlightened mind is that he does not repeat things just for the sake of tradition or culture. When he talks, it's speech from a very liberated mind, very free mind. He's not bound by ideas of culture or any tradition. When he speaks for the sake of its inherent value. So when he came up and he says, follow the precept of non-violence, training into non-violence, he meant to go deeper and understand the nature of violence. That perhaps for many, many generations, we have been a violent species. Initially, maybe we had to be, in order to survive in the world, difficult situations, fight off animals and things, even fight off other tribes, to maintain our family, maintain ourselves, and those things cling on. They become habitual neurological system, urges. The Buddha says, that action you cannot get rid of. That will always be in your mind, no matter where you go, wherever you move. So if you turn that into a training, you're working with something that is very fundamental to you. And he says, how does the violence arise in mind? It's when something happens and you don't like it. It's the reaction, how you react to it. Do you react mindfully? Do you react with awareness? Or you react with immense amount of aggression, letting your primal nature take over and do whatever you can to push it away? Or do you bring in mindfulness? That's what the first precept of training into non-violence was. Similarly, not stealing. Not clinging to things, not generating a longing for material possession strongly, that it can push you off. So similarly, he laid out the first step, what we call sila today, or the precepts. So good or a very sincere seeker of the path of enlightenment, he sees these precepts as laid out by the Buddha, something sacred. Not sacred by their divine right or anything. Not sacred that though the Almighty God or the Buddha or somebody will say, oh, you have followed these precepts, you are a super pious person and you have a luxurious apartment in the heaven. Nothing doing like that. A true seeker of the path of enlightenment, he looks at the precepts as a very sacred training, because these are the very fundamental elements that refining these, working with these, enhancing these very qualities, one will discover the underlying energy underneath it. One will discover compassion. As the same person, same mind, same energy that was working in balance, it can be transformed into compassion. So a student of the Dhamma looks at these things and doesn't say, oh, these are for bunch of babies or beginners, or like, oh, these are baby steps. We look at them with such reverence that these are the most important steps. And these are the most important meditation. The meditation that I do sitting on the cushion for a while, it will help me. It's a very profound practice. Important part of it, but I cannot sit on a cushion 24 hours a day. How can I keep doing the training? How can I keep working? Oh, I have to put it in our action. And if we just think, oh, I have to put it in our action, even to just remember I have to put it in mindfulness in my action is too much of a work. You can't focus on anything. So Buddha came up with very simple ideas that, oh, you take precepts and you say, okay, this is my system of practice. It becomes eternalized on its own and it starts working. Very simplified training. That was what is called the Sila step of the Buddha's teaching. The second step, Samadhi. Meditation, a very important one. And sadly, the most misunderstood one and the least worked on. In a way, Samadhi or the practice of meditation is very much like the hardcore of Buddha's teaching. We understand very little of it. Even different monastic tradition where Samadhi is taught, it's taught in very different ways. The problem is that when Buddha was alive, he taught many different ways of practicing meditation. Not much have been documented, sadly. There was a very great teacher born around Bodh Gaya in India. He came about 500 years after Buddha, roughly. And he wrote down texts. He was a writer. He was a very educated, highly educated Brahmin, a Hindu priest, so he knew writing and reading, and he was a great poet in Buddhism. And with the help of his uncle, when he met his uncle, who was a Buddhist meditator, he saw some great merit into Buddha's teaching. Because when we read the Sanskrit text, those are amazing ideas there. Some of the things the early Sanskrit writers had imagined for people, those are such high, lofty ideals. They're product of such great poetic heart, a great vision for humanity. That's why even thousands of years, even today, lots of universities, lots of great professors, they take such interest in Sanskrit because of his expressions and high ideals. So this was an expert of such texts, such culture. When he came to Buddhism, he realized, oh, we have always talked about these ideals. We have prayed to the gods, to the heavens, to bring this ideal for humanity here. So here is someone, the Buddha, who actually teaches this. And he saw the great merit that I must write down how it really happens, how he can help someone to achieve those ideals here. Not just in dream, but here in practice. How to really become the kind, the compassionate one, here and now. But it was late, it was 500 years later, and that too, whatever he recorded was a very narrow approach. He did not get to move very much all around where Buddha had moved. He spent a lot of time in Sri Lanka, but whatever he wrote is a window for us to try and understand what Buddha was really teaching. His name is, we call him Venerable Buddha Ghosha, a great legendary writer. And I read his text when I was young. And I was so fascinated because I had studied Theravada for almost 5 years by then. And it seemed so simple. It's okay, this, and then this, and this. But when he writes that Buddha employed 18 different kind of meditation techniques. 18 different ways of purifying what is really happening, how it's happening. And he established and showed that what Buddha was teaching was very much a clinical process in a way. That there was some purification really taking place. And he would employ one or two or other techniques based on the individual nature of people who came to him. And based on their specific progress, where they were at mentally, emotionally, physically, socially. And he gave those special techniques to each of them that worked for them. Some techniques worked for someone, some worked for someone else. Sadly, Buddhism got lost from India. Or so we believed, so we thought. But now, we scholars have been doing some research. I'm saying we, not only me, but some scholars in Bengal, India, most in West also. And I call we because I feel a part of that. They have done some research into understanding what was happening to the teachings of the Buddha after the Buddha left. After 500 years of the Buddha, what was really happening? And traditional stories that come from Thailand, Burma, and Sri Lanka, etc., they say Buddhism was gone. Because the institution that preserved Buddhism, that was dissolved. The monastic community, it couldn't work anymore in the same way because it became so spread. There were so many sociological, political changes in the community there. Such a volatile society India was. It was so difficult to preserve it as a cultural thing. So what people did was they preserved the technique, they preserved the practice, but they changed so much. And also communities like Sri Lanka and Burma, where the early Dhamma ambassadors, the ambassadors of Buddha's teaching went, they could not come back right away and confirm what is happening to the teaching here. They had the snapshot of the history that was from the time of the Buddha. And that's what they preserved there, and that's what they clinged on. Much later, around 4th century AD, we see Sri Lankan monks, some Burmese monks, they came to India. They lived around Bodh Gaya and they wrote biographies, they wrote notes. Short note to the king reporting the situation of so-called Dhamma, the teachings of the Buddha in Bodh Gaya. And they write, oh, it's lost, it's gone, it's not there. Because they could not find many monks who wore the robe the same way they did. That the same way they were taught, from according to the tradition that was brought to Sri Lanka 500 years before that, or even thousands, at least 800 years before they came to Bodh Gaya. What is very interesting is that not much later we read a biography, a travelogue in a way, of another brilliant traveler, a scholar who came from Tibet, Dharmaswami. He came around 6th century. And he traveled, he came to the very same place, Bodh Gaya, and he met those very monastery monks that were from Sri Lanka. But not only that, he goes all around Bodh Gaya and he talks how much Buddhism was around, how in this monastery they were practicing this teaching, but they wore different clothes, they looked so different, etc., etc. Combining all these resources, now we begin to understand that very much it was a science that worked there. That people, they changed their culture, they changed their robes, they changed their living system, but they preserved the techniques. Much later he was given so many different names. It was named yoga. The yoga we study today, a lot of what we hear, or we go to yoga studios, they're a very modified version of a teaching from a Hindu teacher known as Patanjali, a man who lived in northern India. Patanjali, he wrote down the journals. He was sort of reformer, so he took the ideas, reformatted them in a different way that could be applied to in different various systems, and he wrote a book. It became yoga. But what we preserved was also one particular aspect. So many techniques of those, so many different techniques, including the technique on breathing. Some different ones. For example, a part of that is preserved in Burma, in a special monastic system called Pawak monastery system. They practice what is called Kammatthana. Some of the Burmese monks, they think it's very different. It's unlike anything they have seen before, but it's still a Buddhist technique. The reason I mention today here is that the idea of samadhi is not just a fixed, rigid system, but is a mental discipline, an emotional discipline. When we bring our mental energy, our emotional energy, psychological energy, and we try and find skillful ways to refine that. And it can be so different from everyone, depending on what their emotional state is. But there is a way to refine that. There is a way to evolve that. And it's very important for students to know, who have worked so much, who have had few years of experience on the path, to understand that this is not just one thing, that there are so many skillful ways to practice this, to help oneself to refine and move further. Third part, known as Panya, these three steps of the Buddha's teaching. The first step being the precepts, or the behavioral practice of mindfulness. The second one, samadhi, mental practice of mindfulness, training in mindfulness. The third, the most important, the pinnacle of Buddhism, is wisdom. It's very difficult to understand what wisdom really is. There are two approaches. First approach is to rely on the expertise and the knowledge of our seniors, guides like Buddha, and try and verify that with our reason, our logic, our practice. So for that, to cultivate such a wisdom, one is encouraged to study the teachings of Buddha, to study the suttas, to study different texts that he's given, so many different teachings, and utilize our reasoning mind, logical mind, to try and understand them. Try and think about it, try to question it, try to verify whether they make sense. And a true disciple of the path of mindfulness, the more energy they invest into, the better results they get. So one is encouraged to read suttas and think why. What is he really trying to mean here? So for that reason, I thought we should, from time to time, we should do a sutta. Today we're going to do a very beautiful sutta. It makes me laugh all the time. And it's very close to my heart, so I wrote a little printout in English. We'll look at it in a few minutes. But in the wisdom, the other aspect, I say that there are two ways of cultivating wisdom. The other aspect is to understand how we work, how our mind works, and most important, how our attitude works. And if we can understand that, it's like a 360-degree turn on ourselves. And to understand the very first principle is that a lot depends on our attitude. That someday, if we have been taught, let's try and imagine, for example, few scenarios. Let's say we watch from childhood. We don't have a very good family. We don't have very good parents who teach us all the good things nicely. There isn't really nobody to teach us much. And we watch movies where we see all the police, the cops. Cop people are really bad people. All the time they're charging you false charges and bribing and all this and that. And let's say one gets this attitude that all the cops are really bad people. If that becomes the attitude, next day they see a cop on the road, they will start perspiring, they will become nervous. And to make it worse, the cops, they are trained to profile people based on their reaction. They say, why is this person so nervous? Oh, this fellow must be. So they'll say, hey, stop a minute. And that will reinforce their belief. Look, these fellows are bad. Why are they picking me out of all these people? Oh, it keeps going on and on and on. I don't remember the name, but a couple of years ago when I was studying in the university in Nepal, they have a very bad education system, let me tell you. They don't have good teachers, but they have very good curriculum. Very good curriculum. All English and everything. So I had to study literature, English literature. I did not understand so many terms, and who knew I would have to study English drama, Shakespeare and whatnots. I did enjoy a couple of poems, though. Some American poets that I got to study. Some beautiful poetry there. But there was one story, I don't remember where it was from, but I think it was from Russia or something. A story about a man. This poor fellow, he's been the most humble man. Most gentle fellow. He works, he's a daily office worker, and he's so quiet, he doesn't even bother anybody. He's so nice to his neighbors that he even takes out their garbage for them. Has never even scolded anyone, including his children in his life. Never done anything except his job and taking care of his family. So timid, so scared. After 45 years of work, one day he finally retires. And this fellow has never taken a holiday or anything, and he's been saving every penny in his life. And remember, this story comes from the era where there were no internet bankings and things. So he got his pension, an entire saving in this 45 years of life. And he has to go to the bank to get the money. And he's very nervous about that. And his wife says, oh, you be very careful to get the money. You know what happens to so many people who walk with lots of money. And he's so scared. And this poor fellow, he walks to the bank. And everyone he sees around, they say, oh, where are you heading? And he gets suspicious. Why are they so curious? Should I tell them where am I going or not? And so he met someone. And he said, oh, where are you going? I said, well, I'm just going to get some groceries and things. And when he got very close to the bank, he saw the same fellow walking behind and thought, oh, he must be following me. And this fellow happens to go to the nearby shop, but he started thinking the same way. The story says that when he went to the teller and says, oh, please give me this much money. And he's very quiet, he just writes down on the paper, and the lady, just to make sure, she reads all the number, some million euros and things. And he's, shh, please. So he reads so loud, the whole bank hears. And they look at him, and they turn to him, and they think, oh, now everybody knows. The drama goes and goes on and on. The story says that he got the bag of money. He was so nervous, so perspiring, and he was running. Then he saw a gang of about 4 or 5 young people with tattoos all over drinking, and they were walking behind. And he became very scared that there is nobody around the street. What if these people just snatch this bag of money from me and go away? What will happen to me? So he starts walking faster and faster, and they're still coming, and he's so nervous. And he starts thinking, I should think of something so quickly. So he sees a fence. He says, oh, if I can jump this fence on the other side, maybe I'll be safe. So he tries to get on the other side of the fence, and he gets caught in the barbed wire. And then these 4 people start running towards him because they see from a distance this poor fellow is trying to climb over the fence, and he got caught there, he might need help. So they start running towards him. Now he's caught in the fence, and he thinks, oh, this is it. They have got me now. They're running towards me. Oh, I'm lost now. And he cries, he throws all the tantrums and starts crying, and they come to him and say, what happened? What happened to you? We are just coming to help you. You were caught. And they actually helped him. And the story just ends there, that his expression when he looked at him, he didn't know whether to laugh or cry at himself. When I read that, I said, oh my goodness, this is all about attitude. Really, the attitude does make a big difference. It took a poet, a literary writer to understand that. I think so many of us understand. The same thing the Buddha understood. The attitude plays a big game. And 90% of all these so-called religious dogmas in the world, they are just these attitudes that are reinforced by cultural, mythological, all these ideas. And that's what we keep on doing, the drama. So he understood it very profoundly. But it doesn't say get rid of all the attitudes or anything and it become like a stone god or a vegetable or something. What he says is that bring in the mindfulness. So to train in that supreme kind of wisdom, we say, so one becomes aware of one's attitude. What is my attitude in this? How am I responding to the situation? Sometimes it becomes very difficult to see our own attitude. And in those times, one's teachers, one's guides, sometimes give them attitudes. When you look at other person, you try and imagine that it could have been your mother and father in the past. Try and really generate that attitude in your mind and see if it makes a difference. To some people, if they have the compassionate nature, or if they have trained previously in compassion in some stage of their evolution, that will work with them. Sometimes it won't work. And some people are taught, oh, then imagine everybody. They may be enemy, they may act bad against you, but they're all trying to help you to become a better person. Because if there was nobody to annoy you, how would you work with your anger? So there are so many skills. Artificial attitude one generates, but it's required that one has a good guide for that. The one does it under the teacher, under a guide. Otherwise, if one is the guard, watching over the things, the owner, etc., it becomes very complicated. Then one doesn't know how long one should keep this attitude for, whether, oh, this is not working, I will just switch to it, and this and that. It turns into something so different. So, these are the stages. To summarize them, that's training into precepts. We don't need to think it as a religious dogma. Oh, I take these 5 precepts and I will follow my life. Oh, then, oh boy, I have become Buddhist or I become this and that. But to understand exactly why they are essential, why they are important, why they are the fundamental principles, and for what reason I should honor, I should practice, and I should use those mindfulness tools. A wonderful teacher of modern Buddhist era, Master Thich Nhat Hanh, a brilliant monk, a wonderful teacher. He was born in the old era, but he also witnessed the transition to the new world. He came to France and had to live and cope up with this new generation and to understand how to work with the Dhamma, how to really see it be applied for the future generation. He had to struggle a lot, and out of those, so many beautiful things were born. Among those, he was the first teacher who actually started using, he didn't call them the 5 precepts or the 8 precepts of a training. He called them precepts of mindfulness. And he didn't do an injustice. He didn't lose anything. Rather, he enhanced it. So one has to understand, but one has to put them on in practice. Oh, they may look such a baby step, but they are so important. Without those foundations, we don't have the ability to cognize our brain around an idea. So one puts them in practice, knowing that they have their benefit. Then one works with their teacher to refine their meditation technique from time to time, see how that works. Sometimes it can work so differently. Sometimes it's sitting on the cushion, you meditate, it works there. Sometimes you'll be told, go on pilgrimage. People have different callings. Some people feel better closer to the trees. Some people are people person. They feel better when they're meeting so many people. And for that, one needs a good spiritual guide. And one needs a good relationship in a way, so that the teacher understands their psychological profile in a way, or more so the spiritual profile, how their brain works, how their mind works, and what could be helpful. When one advises and sees the result, oh, this is working for them, okay, yeah, this might work. So to practice meditation, whenever we practice the breathing awareness, this is not it, this is not the final one. So whenever you practice and something comes to the mind, please ask. Please always ask. Share your experience. This is what we call the heart essence. The anapanasati, the breathing awareness, we call the heart essence. That is common in any kind of meditation practice. Even the most visualized method of meditation that I have studied in other traditions that they follow, they always have the foundation of that is awareness of the breath, to start with that, the groundingness. So it's very essential. We practice it, but if sometimes something happens in the mind, please share, please ask. That's what the guides are for, to always question, to work on this. And the third step is to try and cultivate our wisdom, try to cultivate our prajna. How to do that? There's so many ways. As we say, the first, to study suttas, to study the life of the teachers, to study their struggles, their situation, how they became enlightened. Sometimes we'll find some people, some lives, some stories click, and they work with us. Oh yeah, this is closer to me, this is like mine, works. So for that reason, to study, to ponder, to read more biographies and things, read more suttas, to practice that way. And the most important, I call the heart nourishment of the Dhamma, is to hear many stories. In a way, we are all little childs, and we love to hear stories. As a children, we always love to hear stories from our grandparents, our mother and father. And then society very soon tells us, oh, now you're grown up. It's your turn to tell a story. Try and tell a story. It's so difficult because we haven't heard enough yet. I have a mother, and I ask her sometimes to tell me a story, and it's quite a scene, if you understand. So, because, have you experienced that when you pick up a book and you try and read it, and if the book is so information-based, so explanatory, it's just so scientific, how boring it gets, how it becomes such an effort, and you need a cup of coffee to keep up, right? But if it is a story, like a children's book, it's almost like flowing, easy. Because our brain remembers the story, because it has its steps, like a memory palace. That's why all these stories, they always try and end up in like, oh, happily forever after, or the emotional drama, because these are all codes, how brain imagines things and how it remembers. And if the information is stored in this way, brain never forgets. That's why the most important part of the Dhamma teaching is to learn these stories as well. Now, before we run out of all our time, and before I'm in trouble, let's read this sutta. First of all, I would invite you to read it loud, just from the beginning till the end, and then there is a beautiful story behind the sutta, by the way. So first let's read it, and then we'll talk about it.
Okay, I'll start with the first paragraph.
Okay.
At one time, the Buddha was living in Magadha, just below the hills near a Brahmin village called Ekanala. At that time, the Brahmin Kasidi Bharadvaja had yoked together a number of plows, for it was planting time. The Buddha rose in the morning, dressed up, taken his bowl, and went to where Kasibharadvaja was working. At that time, the farmer was giving food to his workers. So the Buddha went up to where the feeding was taking place and stood to one side. Seeing the Buddha standing for alms, the Brahmin Kasibharadvaja said to him, "I, recluse, plow and sow, and only after having plowed and sown do I eat. You too should plow and sow, and only after having plowed and sown should you eat."
I do indeed plow and sow, Lama, replied the Buddha, and only after having plowed and sown do I eat.
But Gotama, we do not see your yoke and plow, nor your plowshare, oxen, or goad, and yet you say you plow, and you sow, and eat only after having plowed and sown. And then Kasibharadvaja addressed the Buddha with the verse.
So you claim to be a farmer, but we do not see you plowing. Tell me, since you're asked of plowing, so I'll know what you call plowing.
The Buddha replies,
Faith is the seed, practice the rend, and wisdom is my yoke and plow.
Modesty is the pole, mind the strap, mindfulness my plowshare and goad.
Body and speech are guarded well, and food and drink have been restrained.
Truthfulness I use for weeding, and gentleness urges me on.
Effort is my beast of burden, pulling me onward to safety.
on it goes without returning, where, having gone, one does not grieve.
This is how I plow my plowing. The crop use is a restlessness, and when one has plowed this plowing, one is relieved from all suffering.
Then the Kasibharadvaja filled a large bronze bowl with food and offered it to the Buddha. "Please eat, Gotama, sir, this food. You are indeed a farmer. Surely you plow that yields the crop of deathlessness."
How does this story sound? Is there anything odd here, or anything unnatural, or why? I mean, I wonder why it would have been of any significance. Why is it not like any other common story?
Because he's denigrating the Buddha.
That's a good thought,
It's
yeah.
not a common thing.
There is some background information here that I would like to share, and then we can discuss a little bit more about the ideas happening here. Kasibharadvaja is not actually a name. In Buddhism, name was meaningless. It was important what you stand for.
It's not a person's name.
It's not a person's name, it's a title for him. So in Buddhism, often you got very funny names because people had funny characters. So here, Kasibharadvaja, Kasi means farmer, someone who is farming actually, who is plowing. So the Bharadwaja who is plowing. Bharadwaja is his family name. Still in India, the Bharadwaj Brahmin, they are considered one of the highest class of Brahmins. And it is very well known because in India what they did from very, very long time ago was that they came up with this so-called social system. They divided society into sections. They said, okay, one section of society, they should focus on study and literature, writing, reading, sacred practices, and teaching and guiding society. They shouldn't have to worry about earning money, building house and all this. The rest of the society will take care. Very much like that today we pay our professors through tax money. And then they divided society in another sector, what they call Kshetris or Kshatriyas, ruler classes, that their job was to be administrator, to be the army, to be the king, to be general, to work to protect people. Sort of like police force, politicians in a way. And then they divided a class of people, called them merchants. And they had their own individual rights, they had their own privileges as well, that they were merchants, trading, buying, selling things, providing business for society. One sector, that these were service class of people, working and taking care of things. Initially it may have worked, but later on what was considered to be the very ideal design, ideal social system became one of the most ugliest things that we still suffer in India. It turned into caste. Because initially, when you were born in, let's say, a business class family, it was easier for you to be educated in business because your elders, your fathers, and others had business involvement and they could advise you. So it became a culturally accepted norm that a person born in business class will always be a businessman. Can never change. Person born in Brahmin, they can always become only Brahmin, they cannot work and all that. And later on, the Brahmin class became so institutionalized. They trained all these religious ideas around it and declared, much later, it took a long time, but then there came a new idea in Hinduism or Indian philosophy. They said that God created this first class of being through his mouth, Kshatriyas through the arms, business class from his stomach because they have to worry about feeding and taking care, and the service class from the lowest from his foot. So their place is at the bottom of the society, no rights, nothing. One of the ugliest institutions it became later on. So Kasi Bharadwaja, at the time when Buddha was born, this caste system was on its prominence. And Buddha was so fed up with this ugly nature. Very often he was first spiritual teacher that was widely popular, that announced in the broad daylight, even in big conventions, in front of kings and emperors and big gatherings, that no one becomes a Brahmin, the highest class, by birth. They become Brahmin by their action. And this was a dangerous thing to say. One could be killed, crucified, and it would be accepted. All right, somebody killed him in defending the religion, defending the tradition. The Buddha personality, he was so brilliant. He had people around him who loved him so much, who respected him for his wisdom, that not just lunatic saying it without merit. And also, it helped that Buddha was such a great logician. He had such logic, so he debated with these Brahmins and defeated them and proved that this is right. It has its own merit, it worked. Later on, idea of logic and debate became so in-depth in Buddhism that it actually backfired. Later on, it didn't help Buddhism at all, much later. That's another story for another day. So this Kasi Bharadwaja, he was born from that class. He was a thinker, very well-known philosopher. Remember, Brahmins at that time in India, they never ever touched any plow or any work utensil. It was considered that the moment they touch their plow and any plow, they will become impure. This is the degenerate time that even Brahmins have to work. Shame on you, other people. So they lived in great luxury. This Kasi Bharadwaja, he was a great philosopher in his own right. He was the first Brahmin, a very popular Brahmin all around India, who said, no, this is selfish, against human nature, that we just preach a religious text and we don't work ourselves, and then everybody else has to worry about us. This slave mentality has to go away. One has to plow their fields on their own. So this being a Brahmin, very rich Brahmin actually, he was given a lot of land and property from king and people to take care. It is said, the legends say that he actually brought 500 plows and brought a lot of people to work with him, and he himself yoked his plow and he started plowing. And he grew rice and and then he shared and he worked. So this is the human way. And he hated monks because he misunderstood. The monks don't do much and doesn't look like they're doing much. So when he saw Buddha, he had heard about the Buddha, and one day he was working in the farm, in the field. It was a very hot day. When he had worked, people had brought him some luncheon thing. So he just came out of his muddy field and he was washing his hands and feet, sat under a tree and just bringing his rice and was about to eat. And it was the lunch time. Buddha in his monastery, he had seen this Brahmin, the great philosopher Brahmin, working not very far away from the monastery. And he was so well known, people even did not dare to go near him because he was so full of aggression, He was what we would call revolutionary nowadays. People did not even go. Buddha says, no, this is a good opportunity. I will go and see him. I should meet him. So Buddha came there. He brought his empty bowl and covered his robes, and it looked like he is begging for alms now. And he walked right to that very spot where this Brahmin was about to have his lunch. And one being a Brahmin, he knew all the social protocols, and he says, the monk is here, the Buddha is here, and he's known as a great teacher anyway. Now he's here for the food. And he tried to bite at Buddha, and he says, you, wretched one, you should go, you're a shame on humanity. You beg for food, you don't work at all. How do you deserve food? You should plow a field like me, work hard, sweat, grow your own food, and then eat. It seems very right. He is right in his own way, and totally legitimate. It has very valid point. And it was a confrontation between a socialist and a spiritualist. And for me, this was a very important point to understand. Because in the beginning, I hated would be a bad word to say, a very strong word. But I had hard time accepting some of the things that we had produced. One of them, monasticism. And when I was a kid, I used to study all the history, and I realized that in our country, in India and Nepal, we built so many temples, you can't even keep count of it. We go to Metropolitan Museum of Art, the statues we see there, and they say, it's worth this many millions. It says, go down in Kathmandu and find a place where they throw the garbage, you'll find a statue that is more important than that. Just you couldn't manage to steal it somehow, but it's there. And it's so much that we can't even keep count of it. Our archaeologists can't even have an inventory of it so much. So we invested so much money in building temple, but they never built a school. So I was so mad at all these people. And I thought, they produce monks and things, what for? They can build beautiful temples, but they can't build a children's school. What's wrong with them? So I was very much in a place where Kasi Bharadwaj was. And it didn't help that my father was like that. He actually worked in his fields, took care of the people. He programmed agricultural thing, not supposedly for Brahmins. And he never ever in his entire life ever went to conduct a Brahmin ritual at somebody's family and charge them. No, ever. So it didn't really help. So when I read about him, it resonated so much. And I said, I want to see what Buddha says now. What is this fellow going to respond? And what a beautiful answer he gave. He says that, Kasi Bharadwaja, I am a farmer just like you, just like you. You sow, you plow your field, you take barren fields, and you work hard. You put your yoke and plow and turn the soil around, remove all the rough concretes and things, remove the grass roots that eat all the nutrient, you clean all the soil, and then you put good seed in it, and you nurture and you take care, and eventually you reap the benefit out of it. And then you sit and enjoy. This is what exactly I do, but my cultivation is of the inner heart. That I cultivate my heart. I show the good seeds of potential in my heart and take care of them, water them, remove all the weeds, protect them until they ripen. And when they ripen, then I sit anywhere and I enjoy the bliss, the peace, the compassion in my love, and the love flowing in my heart. Not only me, everybody who comes around me, I'm kind to them. They can sit with me and experience compassion and peace, and I talk compassion, I teach compassion, and I share my harvest with everybody. Bharadwaja, don't you see? This was a philosopher. Bharadwaja was a great philosopher. He knew that sometime, just because one emperor or two emperors, they just had a very rough life in their when they were growing up. And they were so full of anger that they waged wars and wars against another emperors and murdered and created so many trouble. So he could be one nice fellow and grow his own food, but until he changes the heart of so many people, until he finds the method to change the heart of people, it's not possible to create a peaceful and compassionate society. So this person, he actually opened his eyes. He says, oh Gautama, this sutta is one thing about all these suttas, they come from enlightened monks. Especially these early Theravada suttas, they all come from enlightened monks, which is nice. One thing we can guarantee is accuracy. But sometimes accuracy gets boring. It's just information, data. So they stop what really happened, they tell you and then tell what the Buddha said, but they don't tell what really happened afterward. What happened to this fellow? Because as enlightened monks, they were not interested into emotional stories. But this Kasi Bharadwaja, he had a wonderful dialogue. A portion of that is actually recorded in one of the Gandhari Suttas, a sutta that became very prominent, practiced around what we say in Gandhar, Pakistan range of India around 9th century or so. It narrates a different version of it. It talks the same thing, but it talks on what happened to Bharadwaja there, what was he talking. He has a long conversation with the Buddha. And he thanks Buddha. He says, how did you find such a method to teach people how to cultivate their inner barren field of the heart? And then and there, he decided to become a monk. He actually became a monk. And he was a great leader of a great portion of society. Following him, so many prominent leaders of Bharadwaja clan, they all became monk. Which leads to another story that I should try and tell you quickly before we end. It's a hilarious one, and I think many of you must have heard before. But before I go there, let's focus here quickly that when Bharadwaja accuses Buddha, or sort of bites him by saying that you should work, shame on you that you beg for your food, you should work hard and produce your own food. And the Buddha says, faith is the seed. How do we understand? What does it really mean? Where is the place of faith in Dhamma? Because it sounds suspicious. The whole beginning, when we begin the Buddhism, is such a reasonable teaching with logic and reason, and believe only what you find to be true. Now where is this space for faith there? What does it really mean to have faith? To sow the seeds of faith. Let's contemplate on that too. He says, the faith is the seed, practice the rain, and wisdom is my yoke and plow. Modesty the pole, mind the strap, mindfulness my plowshare and goat. Body and speech are guarded well, and food and drink have been restrained. Truthfulness I use for weeding, and gentleness urges me on. Effort is my beast of burden, pulling me onward to safety. On it goes without returning, where having gone, one does not grieve. Now this resonates with a farmer. Because farmers in India, because it's a tropical environment, so once they go once a week and they clean all the weeds, but the problem is they always come back. There are so many roots underneath. And it's such a constant headache that you have to keep doing it all the time. So all the social reformers, they knew that we can train people. Oh, be nice, we can educate them. They will be nice, but as long as there is constant watch on them, constant polishing, as we believe here that by constant polishing we can fix the society. How to fix someone that you won't return, they won't fall down. How to climb that there is no backtracking anymore. And that's when Buddha, when he says that, well, one merit of my kind of cultivation is that there is no returning from here. Once it's completed, it's completed. And this resonates with the farmer. Yeah, that's my trouble. That's what I was struggling with. So he says, on it goes without returning, where having gone, one does not grieve. And of course, when the weed does not come back, it's cause of joy, cause of happiness. There is no grief there. This is how I plow my plowing. The crop it yields is deathlessness, amata. And when one has plowed this plowing, one is released from all suffering, that one has a happy harvest. One can eat, feed, and take care of others very well. What do you think of this sutta? Are there any points that resonate to us, or anything that we should talk a little bit about, or even idea of faith? What would it mean in this context, perhaps? It doesn't have to be always teacher's viewpoint. They have their viewpoints in time. But also our viewpoint is relevant, very important, because it helps us to see so many dimensions of it, that it could mean a little more than what probably tradition defines it to be. Let's say in our contemporary society, in our contemporary stage of practice and study, how would we think we would employ? Well, how would we show the seeds of faith?
Were you asking what is faith, or how do we sow the
So
seed?
let's
of
say
faith?
both. Yeah, what we would think what the faith would be, and how we could use that as a good seed in us.
Well, you'd almost have to start with faith, wouldn't you, to follow the Buddha, and then from there you develop the confidence in the teachings, or otherwise, why would you even make that first step, right?
That's a good thing, but yeah, we need a little bit of faith, a blind faith, an unknown faith, more like inquisitiveness to explore the Dhamma, and the faith builds up slowly. But the faith here one is talking about, especially Buddha, because this is also Buddha's story, let's say. He's not just talking about everyone, he's talking about him, because he is put in the court of Bharadwaja and he has to define himself. So what he talks about is that in his life, and he recalls that even previously he has met people. Because having been a king, he had met all strata of society. He had met so many. This is a character of Buddha. That's why when we study his biography very deeply, you'll see wherever he was going, he was meeting people. All kinds of people. He met even all the philosophers in India. Even after he was Buddha, he would meet people. And even his own monks, they criticize him. Why are you going to meet and have lunch with other guy who is anti our ideas? And his Buddha says, no, he's good meditator. Why not? He is a people person. So he talks in the previous times, he met so many people. And he was almost so difficult to ever imagine that someone can totally be selfless. Someone totally can find peace. He met so many kings who, if they won the war, they were happy that year, very happy. And then he returns the next year and they're loathing and crying because someone died or something happened. It was so difficult to even imagine someone can be free from suffering. But he did meet some people. And practicing, he encountered his own mind that it is possible that one can reach end of suffering. One can be free from pain and suffering if one understands how the attitude is playing the game. And how it's really up to me to be ready to give up playing that attitude game. And it's possible. That's the faith he talks about. But in the life of in our beginning, what we can say is that one faith we can generate is that we can believe in our own inherent potential, that there is something more to us. Because very often we feel we lack something, we don't know what we lack. If it's like, I need something, or someone, or maybe I need to go here, or maybe I need to buy this, or maybe I need to do dieting, or maybe I need to do this and that. We don't know what we are really looking for. But what we really are looking for is ourselves. Who are we? Who am I? Who is the one that's part of all this? We want that fulfillment. So at this stage, what we can generate the faith is that there is something more to me that always seems to be eluding, and I seem to be groping in darkness here and there, and it always seems to be right at the tip of the fingers. I can't touch it, but it's there. So in the beginning, we can generate, because of combination of my body and mind, all the potential I have. If I study in my life, I can become a lawyer. If I work day and night, I could become a big business person, etc. These are all possible. And if I commit a crime, I can become a criminal and be punished to jail. It always depends on me. Similarly, I must generate faith in me, that if I train myself, if I learn good Dharma teachings, if I generate good habits, and if I follow good way, noble ones, I will become a noble-minded person. It's fully possible I can train. So to generate faith in our own. In other way, we can say in a poetic language, you can say to generate faith in our own inherent Buddhahood. That it is possible. I have to do my work, but it is possible I can become one. And what great joy in there is. Just this much. This would be the faith for us, I would say. And then everything else we do need. The most important among them, effort. Because without the beast of burden, I don't know, we can plow the field, right? Nowadays we have the beast of burden is the tractors and all this, but we need some source of energy. That is effort. Effort. When we read the 10 perfections of the Buddha, Buddha talks about perfection as one of the paramis, one of the great qualities. That they, in their own right, they're great practice. That sometimes nothing works. We feel so sad, we feel lack of energy, etc. But we have to generate effort in our own mind and say, today I will just sit just for the sake of sitting. And I will really pull myself up. That is effort. Through that effort, we'll keep doing it. It may seem so difficult. I'm here so far away. How can I go to a place where Buddha became enlightened? But no, I will put in effort. I will do this. People have done so many things. Why can't I? If someone can climb all the way on the Mount Everest, why can't I travel to some place like that? Or why can't I? Today is too cold. I don't want to study, and I don't. No, I can put effort into this. So to employ effort constantly. And we find that sometimes we feel so sad that we haven't practiced, we haven't studied, we haven't meditated, and then but realize, no, I can always pull myself up. It's just a matter of effort. And it's up to me, I can always apply effort. I have to keep going. So in those ways, we can learn so many things from this. So let's quickly read from the Buddha's reply once, just to repeat it. We can read it together. Faith is the seed. Practice the rain, and wisdom is my yoke and plow. Modesty the pole, mind the strap, mindfulness my plowshare and goat. Body and speech are guarded well, and food and drink have been restrained. Truthfulness I use for reading, and gentleness urges me on. Effort is my beast of burden, pulling me onward to safety. On it goes without returning, where having gone one does not grieve. This is how I plow my glory. The crop it yields is deathlessness, and when one has plowed his plowing, one is released from all suffering. So you can keep this space with you. How are we doing with the time today? Yeah? So I think we'll have to save the other story that leads or originates from this sutta of the Bharadwaja. So please remind me next Dhamma talk, or please ask me to tell you this story before I forget. It's a wonderful story. It has so much meaning in it that a lot of Dhamma teachers, they give entire teaching just based on that story. And if let's say somebody has to find 10 stories out of the Buddha's life, it's always one of them. Even 5, you bring it up to 5, it's always one of them. Even up to, if somebody wants only 2 stories out of his entire life, it is there. That is so significant. It's a story about Bharadwaja's brother. When Bharadwaja becomes renounced, he becomes a monk, starts practicing, starts cultivating his heart and mind, and starts training others to do the same. What happens to his brothers and clan? Because this is a man of great social prestige and power. When he does something, it affects the whole entire society. And somehow to his family, it affects in such a dramatic way. And Buddha is in trouble because of that too. But we'll discover it in the next time. So let's conclude today's evening Dhamma talk here. But please, I encourage that it's a mutual journey. When a teacher just sits there and he talks, this is very preliminary, this is very basic. The real Dhamma gems, they're born when there is a good interaction between the teacher and student. Because this is not a dry lecture, this is not a physics philosophy or anything. This is a mutual journey of sort. So when we begin to have questions and answers, when we think deeply, when we bring our Buddhahood outside, all the teacher can do is sometimes, acknowledge that's a wonderful thing, that's a good aspect of you, this might be. So the more we can engage into exploration, the more we can bring some good qualities to it, the more the Dhamma study will progress. So I wish you all the best. May you have a very happy New Year. I don't know about your resolutions, but I think today I won't ask them about them. But anyway, I will wish you all the best for those too. Thank you very much.
you, everyone. And again, if you wish to join us, we'll be doing the mindfulness challenge, trying to use our non-dominant hand for a couple of activities throughout our day for a week, and reporting back on any discoveries we have about our mindfulness, our awareness during those activities.